Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janizewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great, Eric. How are you?
Doing fantastic. And
Getting
of
ready
course,
for trick or treaters tonight?
yeah, as we record this, it is Halloween. So we are getting ready for the trick or treaters, the kids to come by, all sorts of candy. And of course, we've already started eating the candy, so they'll get whatever's left.
No, we hardly
Yeah.
get anybody here. We hardly get anybody here, so we will be eating lots of candy for the next couple of days because we're always prepared.
Yeah, it's actually been a long time since we got kids coming to the door in any kind of quantity. The kids in this neighborhood have now grown up. They're all high school seniors, they're going to college, so there's not a lot of trick or treaters left.
I think next year we got to start trick or treating for adults. Show them how it's done.
There you go. Instead of candy, they can give out little bottles of alcohol.
There you
Make
go.
it an adult event.
Yeah, we can organize it. And speaking
Yes.
of that,
And speaking of being organized, yes, our guest this week is Jennifer Glover-Keller. Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Jennifer is a professional organizer. And I know she always gets a kick out of it when I mention this, but she is so good at this that the first time I saw her presentation when we were on Zoom, while she was still presenting, I started reorganizing my office because I was so inspired by what she was saying. I had to get started immediately. So I'm so thrilled we could have her here. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to be here. And yes, I do love that story.
So Jennifer, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into being a professional organizer?
Sure. Before my life as a professional organizer, I was actually an accountant for about 6 or 7 years. Being an accountant, you certainly have to be organized and have good structure around
Yes,
your
you
day
do.
and everything that goes on wherever you're working. And then after about 6 or 7 years of that, I kind of transitioned more to working on the investment side of, a financial department. So I did lots of things there. I was the chief compliance officer, dealing with State Department of Banking regulations and also helping to oversee a program we had to help other people who are like me now, other entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, get funding, make the right connections to really help them thrive. And then I did some traditional investing work as well. So all of that was sort of my life before now. And then I got to a point where I felt like I really like helping people get organized and create structure around their day because I think we all know what it's like when we don't have good systems in place and the stress that that causes when it becomes a chronic problem. And so for me, I thought, I felt like I was in a place in my life where I could sort of jump out on my own and kind of use all of those skills I was sort of innately good at, but also had to sort of, develop and cultivate over a career of working for other people and go out and help other people find that structure in their life so that they're not so overwhelmed by kind of all the minutia, whether it's at work or at home, that kind of overtakes our life sometimes.
And it does tend to overwhelm us if we don't stay on top of it. So it is
Yeah.
so important to have ways to stay organized. And what's the most common situation that you've come across?
I think people just feel overwhelmed. And the biggest thing that I find overwhelms people, aside from like general just having too much stuff, is paper.
Yeah.
It comes at us in, junk mail, legitimate mail. Like, if you have children, they bring things home. It's like, it's all kinds of things that lead to that. So paper is definitely one of people's biggest problems.
And of course, as more and more paper comes into the house, most people look at it and think one of two things. Either I'll deal with it later, which of course is a big organizational problem, or they look at it and say, and this was my organizational problem, I might need this at some point. Let me hold on to it.
Can you I cannot tell you not just about paper, but about lots of things. If I'm working with a residential client, I hear, but I might need this someday a lot. So
Yeah, it's amazing how much clutter you can develop all over the years. And I noticed that you actually do services for people moving, people downsizing, and so on and so forth. And I ran into this earlier this year when we lost my mom at 91, and
yeah.
my dad was 91 also. So they still lived in the house, and there was a whole lot of stuff there.
And
And
somebody has to deal with it.
yeah. And actually, we found a great service out there. Plus I have six younger brothers and sisters, so I mean, there's just lots of stuff out there. But it's really, really important to just earmark that stuff for cleaning out. Obviously, Eric and I talked about estate planning and that kind of stuff a few weeks ago because we both lost people recently, and that's a big part of it too. But obviously, having somebody like you come in and help with the house as is right now, or help with a business as is right now, is great. And but I also ran into a service out there that actually came in. You know how you don't want to throw out the stuff and somebody's going to end up saving it and creating their own new room at your own house that used to be your mom's.
Yep.
Basically, there's a service out there, which I'm sure there's probably others too, but it's fantastic. And all you do is you walk around the house with them and you identify the stuff that you don't want, no, that you do want. And then what they do is they give you a quote for removing everything else. And this one, what they do is when they remove it, if they sell things, then they'll write you a check for that, for where they
Oh,
sold it.
nice.
They'll donate the leftover stuff to charity if they can, and so on. But getting a handle on that in the first place is really, really important. So tell us a couple of stories about how you maybe double the size of a house by walking in there and telling them what they have.
You know, sometimes I mean, it really just depends on the person I'm working with. Like everyone makes decisions differently. Everybody has different emotional attachments to things. So, I'm always walking into a situation for the first time. Like I really have to kind of figure that out pretty quickly, to be able to work with somebody. But, um, I'd say that of the people I've worked with so far as downsizing, I haven't had anybody that's been too overly resistant to the process. And I don't know if that's because, like, by the time they hire me, they kind of feel the pain of whatever is going on. And so they're like, yes, yes, just help me. So it goes a little smoother than it can. Like you were saying, if you lose a loved one, family members working together is a totally different scenario because I'm a neutral third party coming in. So I don't have any of those emotional attachments to the space I'm working in. But it's interesting. But I do find that people are really grateful for somebody who can kind of come in a non-judgmental way and just kind of help them figure out, what do I really need to keep? What do I need to part with? Why do I feel like I need to keep some of these things that I'm conflicted about? So it's always really interesting to work with people at that level.
Yeah, and obviously you got to feel wonderful seeing the after from the before and seeing how comfortable they are, how relieved they are, and so on and so forth. That wow, we actually did this together. I'm sure that that's one of the really
It
great
it
benefits
it
of doing what you're doing.
it's super rewarding because, like I said, everybody has been so grateful for somebody to come in and help them with that process. And it's like, you can, as you're working with them, even early on, you can start to kind of see that kind of lightness come back into them. Like they don't feel all that heaviness and the burden. Somebody's there with them to help them through it. And as they're getting rid of the things, you can see them actually start to feel better when they're having less. I know it's a little surprising, but people are like, "Oh my god, I didn't realize I could feel this good with fewer things."
No, it actually has been studied that minimalism actually makes people feel better because there's always this little voice in the back of your head going, "Oh, I have to clean that out. Oh, I have to deal with that." And the more you put that off, the more it weighs on you. And I talk about this a lot when we talk about mindset. Your brain has no sense of time. So when you have something like that that's just sitting out there, your brain thinks, oh, that has to be done now. And when you're not doing it, it causes stress.
Yes, exactly. And it's like it's that little thing that's constantly rolling around in your head that
Yep,
keeps you up at night or prevents you from enjoying something else because like you said, it's there. Your brain can't let go of it until the thing is done.
exactly. And I'm dating myself with this reference, but the older listeners in our audience will remember Fibber McGee and Molly's Closet. For those of you who are not familiar with this, Fibber McGee and Molly was an old radio show. And every episode, they had one situation where they had to go get something from the closet. And they would open the closet, and it would be followed by the sound of everything in the closet falling out because it was just this closet. They would just throw things in. There was no organization to it. And every week, it would just fall on them.
Yep, I totally. And I've walked into people's homes and it's sort of what you're describing. It's like, you walk in and immediately think, oh, everything looks very clean and very tidy. And it's like, I'm not sure why they hired me. And you open the closet and it's all there. And it's in the basement and in the garage and it's in all the little hidden places.
And it's true. Most people have some place that they stick things. And I do remember one presentation you did where somebody had asked you about the junk drawer.
Yes.
And everybody has a junk drawer. And one of the things you said is, well, if you're keeping things that are actually necessary and it's not really a junk drawer, it's more of a utility drawer.
Yeah, because I remember the gentleman you're talking about, and he was describing to me like, well, what's your philosophy on that? And I said, well, my philosophy is I don't have a junk drawer in my home. If it's junk, it belongs in the trash. But then he went through saying, it's got this, and I'm like, well, that's really a utility drawer. And he really did, say like I use these things, but I call it a junk drawer. And so I think sometimes like how we label or think about things also influences how we behave with those things. So for me, I would have called that a utility drawer.
Exactly. And I do the same thing. I mean, I have a drawer in my kitchen that I refer to as the junk drawer, but there's no real junk in it. It's actually a whole bunch of tools and things that I actually need to
Yeah,
repair things. So, I started referring to that as a utility drawer.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's like just reframe how we think about things, and that kind of changes our perspective.
So, how do you recommend somebody get started when they're looking around and they know they've got stuff they don't use, but they're not really sure how to start organizing or
Sure.
even what to throw out?
Yeah, sure. So if somebody's like, I know I need to get organized, but I don't know how to start or what to do, my recommendation is you always start in a room or an area that has the least amount of sentimental items in it. That way, you're not taking a long time to process those things. You can make relatively quick decisions, and it gets you excited about the process because you're making a lot of progress because it doesn't take a lot of thought to then start working through those items and then working towards the sentimental items at the end, because obviously those are going to take longer to process, emotionally and mentally with what you are going to do with them. So that's sort of the basic of where I would recommend people start. And then I would say, there's sort of a basic process to organizing, and the first part of that process is you're going to sort of like items with other like items, and you can get as granular as you would like with that process. So I use the example of, you may say, okay, I'm going to organize my closet. For example, I'm going to take all of my short sleeve t-shirts and put them in a pile, all the long sleeve t-shirts and put them in a pile. Or you may get as specific as, I'm going to put all of my black short sleeve t-shirts in a pile. So really the granularity depends on what you own, and what makes sense to you. So I kind of let people choose how granular we get. But basically, once you categorize, everything and sort them in piles, it's easier to see how much of each item you had. And that way you can say, do I actually need X number of whatever this item is. Are any of these stained, broken? If in the example of clothing, like, can I actually fit into this anymore? Is it comfortable for me to wear? Have I ever worn it? There's so then you start processing like all of the questions about whatever the particular items are. And so that leads into the second part of where you're going to reduce after you have sorted into those like categories. So you're going to decide, what do you discard, what do you donate, what do you sell, what do you give away to a family member or a friend. And then if you're using any type of products or containers, or if you're reconfiguring a space, like the actual sort of layout, the hardware in a closet or a pantry, you would certainly want to measure, and measure twice. That would be the next step. And then you would buy whatever containers, products, additional accessories you need to kind of complete that space. So that's sort of the basic process. You sort, you reduce, you measure, and then you get any kind of containers or hardware.
And
Um,
I love that you put it in that order, because I've known loads of people who will go, I'm going to get organized, and the first thing they do is they go out and they buy a whole bunch of containers. And of
this
course,
is fun.
at least half the containers they buy are completely useless for what they're trying to sort.
Yeah, and that's, I feel like, where people get excited about the products and the containers and the accessories and all of that type of stuff, because it is the fun part. It's like, decorating your home, like the construction part isn't fun, but decorating it is the fun part. So it's a similar concept. But yes, that's definitely why containers come at the end, because exactly what you said, people get excited about that. They go and buy all of these fun things, and then they don't work for the space and or the project they're working on, so it becomes more clutter, which is sort of counter to the whole process.
When you're done with them, excuse me, do you try and kind of talk them into a lifestyle of doing this periodically? In other words, you go out for a shopping trip and you come home and you bring this. It's a good opportunity right then and there to replace the new ones, take out the old ones, and then put the new ones in there, and just do this as a process so they're not calling you back in 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. Like when I work with people, and some people are more open to this than others, like I try to see it as like, it's not just me coming in offering a service. It is, like you're saying, in a sense, a little bit of helping people make a lifestyle shift. So being really mindful of like what you consume, why you consume it in the first place. And so really sort of keeping the shopping habits in check, but also saying, if something's broken and it's going to cost too much to repair it, or it's not repairable, it's okay to get rid of it and replace it with something else. You don't have to keep it in the junk drawer or this just in case pile. It's okay to let that go. So yeah, sometimes it is just simply talking to people about that, or saying, you don't actually have to go out and buy containers. You can repurpose things that you already own, and then it's less wasteful and it's less expensive that way. So a lot of it does incorporate sort of helping people make that mindset shift around consumption and things. So definitely.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of charitable organizations out there that need the things to distribute to people who need those. And these are the things that you've had around forever. Um, Moving around to businesses, obviously, I'm sure you start out with the declutter, but it's really, really important that you get them into a process of what to do with Eric's papers and that kind of stuff up front. And I imagine that's obviously how the two of you met, probably, and that's really, really important in business to do that, just in the name of saving time and getting more efficient, which obviously everybody wants to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like in a business setting, I can remember working in a corporate environment. It's like you get a ton of paper. So it's not just you get tons of emails, you get tons of paper in your inbox, files and contracts you have to save. So really determining, what do I need to keep? What can I shred? What should not have ever come my way in the first place? And really making decisions about that. And then being clear, like if you have something that's urgent, you need to put it here, because that's where I'm going to look for urgent things. If you put it in this pile over here, I'm not. So maybe, you're going to be following up with something and it's not in the right place. And so, yeah, really working with people about workflow and paper management and kind of all of that is super critical because we get so much information thrown at us, in a physical and digital space that sometimes it does become a lot to sort of manage all of those pieces. So really having some kind of good system, and if you work with other people, communicating that system to them, so that you're kind of all on the same page, really helps everything flow more efficiently.
Yeah, we've talked a lot on this podcast about Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Yep.
And as you're talking, it made me think of one of the things he talks about is that when something comes in, when you get something immediately, you should classify it as do it, delegate it, or delete it.
Yes. Yeah, and you really do, because kind of back to your point earlier, people have two philosophies about paper. And one of them is maybe I'll just get to that later, and later never comes, and stuff piles up and deadlines get missed, or clients are upset because you can't find what you're looking for, and it makes you look like there's all kinds of things. So yes, like making decisions about things and doing it as it comes in is helpful, because we all know, like, if we wait until later, life continues to happen and later doesn't happen.
Yep, exactly. And also, being organized has a huge effect on stress and burnout. If
Yes.
you know where everything is, if you're not overwhelmed with the clutter, it reduces your stress. And I mean, right now, burnout is a major problem in most people's businesses. Being organized really helps you avoid that.
It really does. And I can't remember exactly where the statistic came from. But 60 to 80%, somewhere in that range, I'd have to go back to get the exact number, of people spend 2 hours a day looking for work related information. That's 2 hours a day we could be doing something else with, but because we don't have good digital or physical filing systems or workflow for that, we spend 2 hours of our day looking for stuff, and that becomes stressful. Especially, it's like, if there's a deadline that's quickly approaching, or you're on the phone with someone or interacting with a client, you don't have 2 hours to sit and look for whatever that thing is. You kind
Right.
of have it immediately accessible. So yes, like having a good filing system so we're not constantly searching for things is helpful. It just helps life flow.
Exactly. And, that's really what all this is about, is just making your life easier.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly. That's
don't
my
we have
philosophy.
yeah, don't we have enough things making our lives more difficult? We don't need to add to them.
Exactly. And especially, there's things that are not necessarily fun to deal with, but they're important to deal with. And once you kind of have that system or structure or process in place, you don't have to think about it anymore. It becomes a habit, and you just kind of do the thing, and it just helps your life flow. You're not struggling all the time with all of the stuff that really, it isn't that difficult to deal with. It's just time consuming sometimes.
And that's an important part of what we're talking about also, is it's not just about getting organized once, it's about making it a habit and staying organized.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's why it's critical for people to figure out how they work mentally, and sort of creating those systems that work for them, because that's the only way they're going to stick with this habit or this process they're implementing, is if they find something that actually works for how their brain is wired.
Right. And we really do need to look at all these things realistically. A lot of us look at these things aspirationally. So we'll hold on to clothes we're never going to wear again, thinking, well, someday I will fit into that again. Or, I may need this again. And in fact, again, when I reorganized my office, the first thing I did was I had to say, okay, you know what? These are things I'm never going to need again. And for me, the big thing is books. I hate getting rid of books.
I'm with
But
you.
but I threw out, without exaggeration, 20 years of technical manuals for software that doesn't exist anymore, for programming languages that aren't used anymore. And I thought, okay, you
Exactly.
know what? I'm never going to need these. Let's get rid
Yeah,
of
it's
them.
like the software's on a floppy disk, and guess what? We don't have floppy disk
Right.
drives
You know,
Wait a second, Eric. You could have started a museum for old software just to train
oh,
people.
yeah.
Thoroughly researched business idea.
And that's the thing. It's like, it keeps coming up this, I might need it someday. But I think if we really are honest with ourselves and check in, like, how many times have we ever gone back to an item that we only held on to because we thought we would need it someday? I mean, for me, honestly, probably not even a handful of times in my lifetime have I gone back to that. So, like you said, being realistic, am I actually going to use this? No, I think I'm holding on to it because it makes me feel good for some reason, but I don't actually need this.
And I was actually told a tip for this once, which was, get some boxes, take these things that you think you might need, put them in the boxes, put the boxes in a closet, in a garage, wherever it is. If you don't open that box in the next year, don't open it, just throw the whole box out.
Exactly. And sometimes I do that with my clients. Like if they're kind of on the fence, it's like, okay, then let's just put it in a box. Let's label it. When I come back for the next session, or 3 months from now, or 6 months from now, if you've not thought about or touched any of those things, it's probably okay to go ahead and get rid of them, because you're probably not going to use them. But yeah, I mean, it's a great tool because it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And if you said, like you said, like, if I haven't touched it, I probably don't need it. So let me just toss the whole thing.
Exactly. All right. So we are getting close to the end of our time. So if people want to find out more about your services, if they'd like to get in touch with you to hire you, how can they do so?
The easiest way is to visit my website, which is just jennifergloverkeller.com. And you can see all of the services I offer there, where I work, how I work. I've got a blog, I've got some additional resources page. You can see different books or articles related to the services I offer, where you can kind of read on your own if you want to DIY some things or just learn more. So it's a great resource to find out more about me and what I do.
Fantastic. And, I mentioned David Allen and getting things done earlier, but I know you always, in every presentation I've seen you do, you always mention the book Atomic Habits,
Yes.
which was also a fantastic book. I highly recommend people check this out. It's not just about getting organized, it's about creating better habits for you to get through your day. So it's very helpful. You can take a look at both of those books. And Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for today?
I love talking about the system. I mean, organizing, just like anything else, is a process. So your sort, reduce, measure, and containers is really, really just a wonderful way to do that. But again, we talked about making it a habit. So if you can, once you get something in, like Eric was saying, you're either going to use it, you're going to take a look at it again later, or you're going to dump it. The more you can get into the habit of starting out that way and just coming up with something where you are constantly weeding things out, whether it's like every Friday or something like that, it's really, really important to do that. And obviously, working with somebody like you to get them organized and really have them figure out the process themselves by your brainstorming with them, I'm sure they feel really, really good when that happens.
Yeah, I think for me, the big takeaway is that you have to get started on this. And the best way to get started is to, start changing your mindset that you need to keep everything. We don't. When something comes in, if it's something you need to take action on, do it. If it's something that's garbage, get rid of it. If it's something that someone else needs, pass it on. But don't sit on these things thinking, well, someday I'll take care of it. Or, as Jennifer said, you'll take care of it later, but later never comes. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
You've
you.
been, You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.